And the Siddur is really a book of philosophy of the Jewish people about how we view life. And it's not something that we came up with recently at some National Confederation of the Conference of the Northeastern Jewish Federation Education J thing. Like, it's something that we've been dealing with for thousands of years. So I wanted to find the oldest thing I could. This is from the early 1700s, and it is a very deep Kabbalistic siddur. It was actually printed in Amsterdam, and it is based on the works of Rabbi Yeshaya Halevi Horowitz. And I'm going to share with you an idea from this. And this huge thing is actually the original binding. It's worth thousands of dollars and perfect condition. So a person, a Jewish person, come up after class and you'll check it out yourself and touch it. A person would wake up in the morning. This is it. This had everything in it for the whole year. And they would wake up Jewish in the morning, have that time period, look at it, connect to it, and connect to deeper ideas. And people who own items like this use it today because it gives us that physical inspiration that we could connect to something bigger than ourselves, even on a historical level. So the idea I'm going to share with you, which is really deep, based on something that I saw here, this is a reflection of Jewish economic priorities. We were focused. Printing a book was very expensive. You print it once on paper, it could be wrong, you have to make sure it's correct. And we were not so wealthy. Most of us didn't live in 516 in 300 years ago. We were not wealthy at that point. Yet we paid large money to have something like this because we wanted to wake up in the right way. So we know everything in the physical world has 3 dimensions. We live in a 3-dimensional world: time and space, time, past, present, future, and space is height, width, depth. We live in a 3-dimensional world. And in that realm, we also, when we wake up, deal with 3 dimensions, which is, the first one is the physical, your body. Second one is your neshama, your soul. And the third dimension that makes these 2 opposing forces come together as one, that's this body of knowledge that comes from beyond this world called Torah. So to frame why we wake up in the morning, and not only do we learn Torah, but we make a bracha, a blessing on it in a 3-pronged manner, I want to show you the depth of how this realm, our framing of Torah, reflects our perspective of what it is. So it has 3 parts to it. The first part, as you covered, is that just like any mitzvah, you make a bracha on it before you do it, like before lighting Hanukkah candles, you make a bracha. Make a bracha on learning Torah. But then there's another whole part, and of praying for your descendants, and as well as Asher Bachar Banu, about connecting back to Mount Sinai. So to put this in perspective, let me give you a clarity about where the source is. Where's the mitzvah to learn Torah? Meaning there is Torah, but what's the mitzvah to learn Torah? So it says in the Shema, Vishinantam Livanecha. Vishinantam roughly is you should teach Livanecha, your children. But as you know, Vishinantam doesn't just mean simply teach or to learn. It means you need to have it perfect so that if somebody asks you a question, you won't stutter and you'll be able to answer back right away. The one word, which is almost non-translatable, is vishinantam. You have it clear in your mouth and you won't stutter. Livanecha, to your children. If you don't have children, Livanecha, the Talmud tells us, it means to your Talmidim, your students. So the source of learning comes, how do you know to learn? Get it straight in your mouth and teach it to your students. What does that mean? What if you don't want to go into teaching? What is the concept of Livanecha? So and why is this the source of learning? So the concept is, we view the universe is that we are similar to God. Just like God is a spiritual entity in an unimaginable way, but ultimately created a physical universe, made that real in the physical. Our goal is to take a spiritual idea and make that real. So even though Torah is a book of philosophy that illuminates our eyes and guides us to how to view the world, but the goal of that is ownership with clarity. I don't want to just know what it says, let me look that up. If I own wisdom, I need to be able to verbalize that with clarity, verbal clarity. I don't just live in the resources of my memory, I live in the world of speech. Speech is the ultimate combination of your spirit and your body. I'm sharing with you spiritual ideas, and yet I'm doing it in a physical manner with my mouth. The mouth reflects who you are and how you make it real in a physicalized manner. When we learn, if you don't own it unless you can explain it. Everybody knows where they live, and you can give everyone directions to your house from wherever you are because you have it clear. The mitzvah of learning is to own it to a way that you could explain it. To who? Levanecha, to your students. What if I don't have students? Everybody's a teacher in the Jewish perspective. You will only own that information when you give it away. Because when you give it away, when you own it and clarify it and give it away, now you're putting it in the framework of what it is, which is an eternal, moving object. I'm allowing that object to remain in motion. I'm moving out of the way and allowing it to exist. So you have it, you give it. An object in motion has to remain in motion. Torah is an object in motion coming down to me, and now I give it away. Vishinantam levanecha, I'm going to teach my children. Now, my students. Levanecha also means my children. The concept is, you see in that second prayer, we say, may it should be sweet in our mouths and in the mouths of our descendants and of their descendants. When a person wakes up in the morning, they don't only think about themselves and their happiness, but that when you have clarity, that clarity will be passed on to future generations. All of our great-grandparents and their great-grandparents may have owned this siddur. They were davening in the morning. They were having clarity in the morning so that we can be here. The Talmud says anyone who teaches their children in a clear manner, it's as if they have taught all their generations until the end of generations. Once you get it up to hyper speed in a hydroplaning manner above nature, and you're sharing it, and you're concerned not just for yourself, I want to own it, but I want to pass it on to the next generations. When you're in that modality, that is when you're connecting to Torah in its proper realm. Torah is not just intellect. It's not just Jewish arithmetic, Jewish forms of philosophy. We believe it's a body of knowledge that preceded the world. When we deal with it in that way of I own it and I'm giving it, that's the ultimate realm. The last blessing of the three is Asher Bachar Banu. People know this from their bar mitzvah. Asher Bachar Banu, chosen from all the nations, and Hashem gave us the Torah. Meaning, there's an indisputable fact that we all have to deal with, that the Jewish people were given the Torah on Mount Sinai X amount of thousands of years ago. And all of us, despite all odds, are here today. And that Sinaitic experience never repeated itself ever again. This concept, when you are now in the eternal, I want you to hold on to this idea, when you're flowing it out in that above nature way, you now connect back to the original source. The Talmud says, if you teach your child well, it will be as if you are connecting to Torah on Mount Sinai. So if I connect in them now, present, and I look towards the future, it will be as if I'm connected to Mount Sinai in the past. In other words, when I get it up to this level of where it should be, I own the now, the future, and the past. Meaning, Yeah, in the physical world, there's division of time, present state, future state, past state. But if I can really connect deep, I can make my present state, my future state, and my past state all one. Because above the clouds, there's unity. In the physical world, it's a world of division. In the spiritual world, everything is one. I acknowledge I'm in a physical world. I acknowledge there's a present, there's a future, and there's a past. But when I cover all those bases, I make those three into one. I want to connect in the now. I want to throw it towards the future. And when I do that, I'll connect to the point of origination when we receive the Torah. So the pregame, the blessing that a person makes every morning when you wake up, as we mentioned before, that the whole concept of sleep, this crazy reality of I was conscious, now I'm asleep, I wake up, I renew myself. I'm a new person, body, soul. But how do you blend two opposing forces? Body and soul are the tension that keeps us alive now. 40 billion cells in a very fragile manner is currently alive. And no doubt, I'm not just a talking squirrel, I'm somebody inside that spirit that I will live beyond my body. But how do I make peace in the now between these two opposites? The third wheel, the tip of the triangle that makes peace between the two is this realm called Divrei Torah. Not just Torah in its conceptual, Torah in its physical. When I take Torah from up high and I make it into this world, that will make a blend between the tension of my body and soul. That will connect me to eternal. And when I take the three and make them one, I take the three of the present, the future, and the past, I can make them all one. And that's why Rabbi Yeshaya Levi Horowitz, in his explanation of the Siddur, says there seems to be a contradiction in this blessing about when God gave us the Torah, because it says, Asher Bachar Banu Mikol Amim, He gave us the Torah, and we end off the blessing, Baruch Atah Hashem, Nosein HaTorah, who gives, present tense, the Torah. He asked, wait a minute, if this whole blessing is about thanking of the past, then the actual phrasing of it should have been, Nasan, you gave, past tense. What do you mean, Nosein? He says, because when you finally hit that realm where you're connected in the now and in the future and in the past, you are having an experience in the ultimate now moment in which Hashem is giving to you who you are, where you are, in your apartment, at this moment, the Torah. You're reconnecting for the very first time. So the whole morning concept is birth. I'm alive for the very first time. And in that realm, when I acknowledge what's my involvement, I have to be osik in Torah. I have to be involved verbally. And I have to be concerned and not a narcissist that it's not just me that's involved, it's everybody that will come from me, all the future generations. When I have that responsibility and consciousness, I'm connected back to the original source. To such an extent, I'm not just historically connected to the original source, I am experientially connected now. So the goal of Waking Up Jewish is we want to wake up and connect, but the framing of connection has to be, what's this body of intellect that we're dealing with? The body of intellect that we're dealing with is eternal, was, is, and will be. And when we acknowledge those levels and keep them in mind, first blessing on the now, second on the future, third on the past, you redefine your now in this moment. And that parenthetically is the essence of Hanukkah. Hanukkah is not, the Greeks didn't want to kill us physically. They just wanted us to redefine what Torah is. They wanted to say, come on, Torah is just a body of knowledge, just intellect, leave it alone. We believe this illuminates in an above nature way, and that's why 7 days of the week, 7 days of music, 7 notes of music, the concept of 7 always represents nature. 8 represents one above nature. When the oil that represents Torah, the illumination, happened in an above nature way that established how we view Torah, that it's a realm of knowledge that supersedes nature. The Greeks wanted to use intellect in order to perfect the body. I will use my intellect to perfect my body, work out my muscles. We want to use intellect in order to make the physical world a platform for the spiritual world. We want to make this physical dimension a platform that the spiritual can flow in. We could take this realm, this zone that we're in, and make it bigger. Happiness happens when you're connected to something bigger in a whole way. Whenever the Torah talks about happiness, it's always about wholeness. The only time there's a mitzvah to make somebody happy is at a wedding. There's a mitzvah to go and make them happy. Are they sad? Why should you make them happy? It's like, oh, I'm sorry to hear it. They ripped you off with the flowers, right? Oh, yeah, I know. It's crazy, right? You never, had you known? I know. Had you known? Crazy. You know what? Let me cheer you up. I'll dance. No, it got ripped off. The concept is that because you're taking two people and you want to make them one. They're becoming one. Happiness is when two things become one. In Hebrew, it's called shlemus. When is there happiness? When two become one. There's a third party involved in making two one. How do you rectify this dichotomy of spiritual and physical? By making them one through this entity called Torah that's above nature and enables us to connect in a balance that is beyond nature. So where's my eternality? It's here now. I'm not waiting for the future to connect to the eternal. I want it now. I'm going to connect to it right now when I have that balance. The end. Thank you guys.